Hello and welcome to a special live, via satellite, contemporaneous, dare I say, topical episode of Midlife Krisis. I am, of course, joined, as always, but not in the same room, but in spirit. There he is right there. There's Uncle Bob on the screen. And look at that tremendous background he has going.
This is the highest production value and artisanally crafted background image, you might say.
Yes. We are nothing. We are nothing if not an artisanally crafted audio and video podcast. Just to kind of get the lay of the land here, why we're doing this, why we're convening. The people don't necessarily know, but maybe they do. They assume it. We usually, because we're full-time working men, we're family men. We meet up we'll say once a month, somewhere in there, and we just kind of go boom, marathon, just brain drain. It's like we're sprinting. It's like we're mental athletes, and we just talk and talk and talk. But sometimes some things happen out there that when our schedules allow it, we want to get to as close as the event as we possibly can. This is one of those. So in the beginning of this episode, we're going to talk about what we've been playing. That's going to segue into a recent controversial release on Xbox. That's, of course, Hellblade 2. And then we're going to wrap things up with as we record just 2 days ago, I believe 2 days ago, the PlayStation State of Play aired. And we have some things to say about that. So before we get started, Uncle Bob, is there anything you want to say to get us going here?
No, I have a lot to talk about today, so let's get to the meat.
All right. We are on our way to the meat. Dare I say, this is a meat bus, and I'm driving this son of a bitch. Okay, so I'll get what I've been playing out of the way because I need to talk about these two items. I have props. You know, Uncle Bob, how much I love to have props on this program. We'll go with this one first. So I will show this to the camera. This is the newly released remake, not remaster, but remake of Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. If I could, and I would, and I will, let me gush about this game for a little bit. It is so unbelievably good. It's silly, stupid good. If you're unfamiliar, which I think you are, it is an action RPG, turn-based. The people have been clamoring for a game like this game in particular, to come back out. It's the most beloved Paper Mario in the whole franchise. It is so wonderfully written. It oozes charisma. One of the things that's kind of so different and unique about it in terms of the entirety of the Mario universe is that it starts out in this like dirty, grungy port town that's covered in graffiti, and there's ne'er-do-wells and criminals all over the place. And it's almost like for a Mario game, it's like a mature theme. Not like, we're shooting up horse mature or anything crazy like that. But for Mario, it's really kind of out there. But the writing is just laugh out loud funny. There are no dips in the story progression or anything like that at all. They did an amazing job of keeping the look of this GameCube classic and just like updating everything. The reflections are so awesome. There's been some complaints about that it runs in 30 frames and the GameCube original runs at 60. It doesn't matter to me at all. Like it melts away as you play it, and it doesn't affect the timing. The combat is very timing based, and the what's it called? The smaller frame rate really hasn't affected that for me at all. It is such a it's funny because it's a new game of an old game, a 20-year-old game, and it is insanely refreshing to play something like this in 2024. I'm super happy that it came out. And as a side note, as a little fun story, so I never played this game on the GameCube, although I was a very loud and proud fan of the GameCube back when it came out. It's just one of those things where I missed it. And I don't really know why. I don't really have an excuse. Fast forward several years, in like 2017, 2018, I finally did buy it on the GameCube. And I played every bit of it with my son, who was a toddler at the time, who was starting to learn how to read. And this game taught my son how to read, essentially. I would read the entire game as I played it with him, and then ask him to go up to the screen and point out different words. And he loved the story just as much as I did. And yeah, so it's like, not only is it a great game, but I have this like wonderful fond memory of being a parent and teaching my son how to read. And so when I first started playing this game, I had him in the room. My son's going to be 10 in September. I had him come into the room when we started playing, and I had him read the entire game to me, and he reads it at an incredibly high level. So it was just awesome. It was like having like a narrator next to me read this game, which is what I did for him,
Yeah.
whatever it was, 7 years ago. So Uncle Bob,
That's so wholesome.
it's the yeah. And for a guy wearing a Jason Voorhees shirt, it doesn't get much more wholesome than that. So Uncle Bob, have you gotten this game yet?
Uh, no. And I'm usually really good about the Nintendo first party games, but I've gotten so far behind on the last few Nintendo first party games that I want. So I watched the trailer. I've heard your praise. Our Prince Danny has also praised it. I did not play the original. It looks good. I like to play it. Is it a remake or is it like a whole new? Is it a true remake or is it just like a story in that universe, a new story in that universe?
So it's they took the exact game and redid the music and the graphics, but maintained it to preserve the original look and feel of the game. The story doesn't need to be touched, and I believe they kind of punched up the script a little bit, but really nothing drastic at all. Just kind of a little dusting here and there. And then there are some quality of life improvements. A common criticism about the GameCube game is that it's very backtracky, and this game still is backtracky, but they made that easier to do. So it's not as tedious of a process, not as padding. But yeah, this is a game where I know you're not going to listen to me, and that's fine because that's the nature of our relationship, and that's okay. But whatever game you're playing right now, you should stop and put it on the back burner because trophies aren't worth it, and you should play this game. You'll fall in love with it. Like you'll honestly fall in love with it, as you said. The good Prince Danny did. Yeah, I would say before you even play Tears of the Kingdom, before you even play Mario Wonder, which I don't think you've played those games, play this game. You will love this game. I guarantee you'll love this game.
Okay, so what is it about this game that's so good? Is it just the charm of the story? Is it because it's in the Mario universe? Is the gameplay really good? Is it quirky and interesting because of the things you can do with a paper-based character?
So it's everything. It's the graphics are amazing. Like it's not only is the style awesome, but like the little technical flourishes, like reflections and lighting and stuff like that. Some of the best that you'll see on the Switch, and that marries so well with the style. The music is all newly done. It's like a new orchestral soundtrack, so that's awesome. The gameplay, oh my god, the gameplay. So Mario RPG for Super Nintendo, I know you've played that game because I borrowed your copy 30 years ago. It has that
Great.
timing, that action timing thing. This does that and really fleshes it out. And there's like two levels to it. There's like the overt in your face, like here's an A button on the screen and it tells you when to push the button to get extra juice, so to speak. But then there's like a subsystem under that for stylish points that the game doesn't really tell you about. You kind of have to figure it out on your own. And if you're good at timing windows in gameplay period, which I mean, not to toot my own horn here, but toot as a fighting game fan, like and a drummer, like timing, I gravitate towards that kind of gameplay. But you can kind of exploit that extra like sub level of gameplay to have it be that much more fun. And for people who don't like that kind of gameplay, even like the baseline stuff, keeps you engaged in the combat so much more than a traditional turn-based RPG. But it hits like a turn-based RPG. So a lot of these other Paper Mario games that have come out since then, they do these wacky battle gimmicks. You know, Origami King had this weird ring, like puzzle game element for all of its battling. I liked it. A lot of people hated it. It's pretty divisive. But one thing you can say about it is that it's weird. This is not weird. It's just fun. It's just pure fun. So the gameplay is great. The story is great. Music's great. Graphics are great. And yeah, what you mentioned too about like having fun and manipulating the paper stuff, that's all in there too.
Okay.
Like you gain powers that have to do with like being paper, like folding up into an airplane, turning flat and going through like a gate, all kinds of stuff like that. And so an example of like the writing and why it's so like fun. When you get these new powers, you'll encounter these chests, and this happens pretty early on in the game, so it's not very spoilery. But like the chest like tricks you into opening it, and then all of a sudden it's like, haha, you've been cursed, and it talks about how like this thing's gonna ruin your life, and then it's gonna ruin your life by giving you these powers. And so like the chest is like kind of a moron thinking that it's doing bad to Mario, but in fact, it's actually like helping Mario along in his journey. And they hit that note throughout the game. So yeah, stop everything you're doing. Just stop it. Listen to Uncle BT.
You don't
and
even know
play this game.
You don't know what I'm doing. I could be playing Chrono Trigger, and then that's why I can't play Paper Mario. So
we both know that's a bold-faced lie. you're playing
Brian,
some.
I am an attorney. Okay, we don't lie.
Yeah, you're provenance. It's here. It's on the record. My man does not lie. And we both know that you're playing some game that you don't like, because that's kind of how you occupy your time. And then you're playing Helldivers, and that's fine because you do like that one.
Let's be clear. It's not that I don't like the games that I'm playing. It's that I don't like the way that I'm playing them. It's an important distinction.
Right. And you have no emotional or mental control over changing that.
Okay.
And that's okay.
And on that note, let's talk about Cuphead, which I just platinumed.
So I haven't turned on my PlayStation in a really long time because I've just been playing Switch and a lot of Xbox. And I noticed you sent me a message that had, and I'll say this: I love shitting on your addiction to trophies because it's fun. To be frank, it's just a fun thing to do. But absolutely kudos to you because I love Cuphead and I know how hard it is. So that one's actually one that you deserve some praise. So go ahead and earn your praise. That's a difficult game to do it in. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. Yeah, keep that dance going. Perfect. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about before I turn it over to you, good friend, is I have this. This came to me from my good friends at eBay. It is a Saru SD loader for the Sega Saturn. And what this incredible device does is...
Please tell me. I have no idea what that does.
Well, I'll tell you what it does. It allows me to have the entire global library of the Sega Saturn on an SD card. This is what's called an ODE. It's an optical drive emulator. So it tricks the Saturn into thinking that this is its CD-ROM drive. And you basically just like it's an EverDrive for your Saturn. And what's really special about this is there have been products that have been out for quite a while that do this for the Saturn, but they cost $250, $300. This you can buy right now on eBay or AliExpress for $50, and it works better than all of that shit. One of the advantages is that when you load the image files onto an SD card, is it basically eliminates loading time. So, for example, some of the Mortal Kombats on Sega Saturn, when Shang Tsung would morph, the game would literally stop and load for 5 to 8 seconds each time.
Every time.
And
great gameplay.
Yeah, really great gameplay. But that doesn't make it go all the way away, but it makes it go down to like half a second, that kind of thing. But more than that, that's just kind of a cute little thing that it does just by the nature of the technology. But what's really special about it is that you can, it basically gives anyone access to this incredible global library that has been inaccessible for years for, $50 and a couple hours of downloading stuff on the Internet Archive. So yeah, this I can't recommend.
You plug that into the Saturn directly.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. The other thing this thing does, and this will be a quick tangent. It does. There's a cartridge drive on a Saturn. For those of us that don't know, you probably don't know so well because you haven't thought about a Saturn in 25 years probably.
About that, yeah.
So there's a cartridge slot, and originally, when Sega first designed that system, the idea was that they would have games on CD-ROM and cartridge, and it just never happened. They used the cartridge slot mainly in America, they used it exclusively for saving your games. Then in Japan, they released RAM expansions that made games like X-Men vs. Street Fighter be better than the PlayStation 1 versions. Pretty much across the board, 2D games are better on the Sega Saturn. Most of those games, if not all of them, didn't come out in America because in America at that time, we all just wanted terrible 3D games. And we're both guilty of that because we lived through that.
Yes, we did.
But what's
Very
funny is like
years.
Yes, and when you go back and you look at that stuff, the stuff that holds up, the stuff that stands up to the test of time is all the 2D games. So anyway, another thing that this does is that it makes you think of like a future of homebrew developers, which that's a thing on Saturn, but they could make a game and make it playable on a cartridge, which to me is really, really, really cool. And the fact that someone figured out how to do this in the first place really opens that system up. and into things that we never thought were possible with the Saturn. And for all of the true takes about how difficult it was to design games for the Saturn, the fact that we're all these years later and it's been opened up, now it's like totally, open this door for people to walk through, and it's really really cool. So yeah, on eBay, it's you need a little bit of computer know-how to get this thing up and running, but it's not crazy. And the
Yeah.
biggest advantage is that, like I said, this is $50 and then an SD card. I will say, be careful using certain SD cards on this. It's kind of finicky about that. You need like an official like Samsung or SanDisk card. I had mine came with a 64 gigabyte card, and it immediately corrupted like in the first day. So you get what you pay for a little bit on that regard, but the upside is that it's one now that mine's working and properly tooled in. I haven't had an issue with it, and I've been playing it to death. So it just takes a little setting up, and it's good to go. So then the last thing I've been playing, and then I'm going to throw it all over to you, is on your recommendation. You on our show multiple times. You've talked up Hellblade. Hellblade 2 just came out like a week as we record. I think like a week ago, something like that. You predicted on this show multiple times that this game. And look, friend, I'm not here to insult or attack. I'm just stating the facts. I'll leave that up to you on how you want to address that. But on multiple occasions, you've mentioned how that was going to be the game of the year. I'll say this about Hellblade 1. I played it for probably half of the game. The first chunk of the gameplay that I played, I got up to the first boss. I thought the graphics were amazing. I'm talking Hellblade 1. I thought the graphics were amazing. The environment, graphically impressive, but it was very kind of mundane and muted and like similar. I wanted that to change a little bit. The story was pretty cool, pretty compelling. And then I reported back to you on our Discord, our private Discord, saying like, hey, yeah, I mean, like the gameplay, really hope it opens up and starts doing new things. But the other things kind of want to keep me going. And then you said, well, yeah, the gameplay, this is what the game is. And then I went back to play it another session and I quit because it's boring as shit. None of the things that I liked about it were enough to sustain me from a gameplay standpoint. And then Hellblade 2 comes out. I have it downloaded. After you and I talked about it, I did turn it on just to look at it, the razzle and the dazzle of the graphics. But I'm not playing that game. And I'm pretty much after we are done recording here, I'm going to delete both of them off my hard drive so that I have more space. But yeah, I got to be honest with you, because I knew about Hellblade. I'd heard about it, various podcasts and reading about it online. When you said Hellblade 2 was going to be the game of the year, I was skeptical on your claim. But you really believed in Hellblade 1, the experience of it. So benefit of the doubt, all that good stuff. You and I have differing tastes in games, but a lot of time we talk about this, but a lot of times that Venn diagram, we do meet up in the middle occasionally. So that's why I played that game based on your recommendation. And yeah, it's not a video game. It's whatever it is. It's an interactive story. I mean, there are gameplay elements, but and I made this comparison to you on the Discord. It reminds me in so many ways of the original Assassin's Creed, where at that time Assassin's Creed 1 came out and it was like a technical marvel. The fact that Enzo, I think it's Enzo or Ezio, whatever his name is, could just kind of run up buildings and like almost automatically find footholds and climb up. All that stuff is really, really cool. But the gameplay was you do one of three things over and over and over for 15 hours. And that was another game too where I just stopped playing it because it just couldn't, from a gameplay standpoint, which is the most important thing to me about video games, couldn't hold my attention at all. So to me, Hellblade was an Assassin's Creed 1. Now Assassin's Creed 2, which is to this day probably the most beloved thing in the series, really took those concepts, added new stuff, fleshed out that game. And people still talk about Assassin's Creed 2 to this day being like one of the better titles from that whole generation. Hellblade 2 didn't do that. And so I'll turn it over to you. Tell us your Hellblade story, good sir.
All right. I have so much to say about this and some other things. So it's going to be difficult for me to convey how disappointed I am with Hellblade 2. So that is the thesis. The the subtext to it is that after you said that you were disappointed with Hellblade 1, and then I was disappointed with Hellblade 2, I was like, well, God, well, maybe I was wrong about Hellblade 1. So then I went back and looked at Hellblade 1. I didn't play it, I just watched some YouTube videos, and then it just reminded me of things that I forgot. And I still actually think that it's good for what it actually was. So all of those things that you mentioned, how graphically impressive it is, and still is, for you're talking about a game that came out 8 years ago. I mean, it really, for a small development team, it's a very impressive graphical feat. But also, I was really into the story, and then and certainly the mood and the early beginnings of the game. You're like in the middle of a lightning storm. Is the environmental effects I thought were fantastic. And then probably the place where you and I differed the most, at least on the original Hellblade, in terms of our experience, was that the part of the playing the game is the psychosis that you're supposed to experience while people are the voices in your head are whispering at you, which did zero for you
Yeah.
and did everything for me. And that's fine. Reasonable people can differ on things like that.
Well, yeah, I think that's a really subjective thing. Um, I said this to you. I'll say it here publicly. Like, I understand why you liked it because I think technically it's very well done. But I think my issue with it, the substance of it, is I felt it was very heavy-handed, and I think they could have achieved the same thing by simply making it less annoying to me. Like it's constant.
Well, the example you
Hellblade
gave
1 is
was
constant.
the example you gave was the voices whispering, "Climb the ladder, climb the ladder,
Yeah.
climb the ladder."
Yes.
Which
It's
made
like,
me
yeah,
chuckle for sure.
I'm climbing the ladder, guys. I get it. We're cool. I get what you're doing here. You can take your mental inside t-shirt off.
So that's it's a little feather in your cap there because that is something that happens in the game. It's not the best example of the of how the voices talk to you, but it does happen. All right, so I'm really glad that you brought up the Assassin's Creed 1 and Assassin's Creed 2 examples because that is exactly what I was expecting Hellblade 2 to be. I was so impressed with Hellblade 1 and what was able to be achieved by that small team. I was like, man, this team, given a budget, given the near unlimited resources that Microsoft has, and given the extremely extended development cycle where this game was announced a year before the Series X came out. So I think it was 2019 it was announced. We're now in 2024. Game finally comes out. And I'm expecting a lot. I'm expecting that all the things that the game did well, it will continue to do well. And the things that it didn't do well, and most notably the gameplay, which it was criticized for at the time,
Yeah.
they would fix. You're a developer, and everybody's saying your graphics are great, your sound is great, this is a really unique and fun story, but your gameplay kind of sucks. What are you going to work on for the sequel? You're going to work on the gameplay, the weakness of the game, or so you would think.
Yeah.
Then I start playing the sequel, and if you can freaking believe this, it has less gameplay in it than the original did.
That's
and
so wild.
Yes. And so I'm playing through it, and graphically, it is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It is probably, graphically speaking, the best product that you can buy as a video game right now.
Are you playing it on your PC?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have a 48-inch monitor that I play it on in 4K with a 4090 powering it. So it's the bleedingest of edges to experience that I'm experiencing this game in, and it hits all of the notes. So graphically, it's the most impressive video game I've ever seen ever.
I think it's the one thing that you cannot take away about Hellblade 1 or 2 is that if you want to look at if nothing else, if you want to look at a truly next gen looking game, that's what it can do. So like
Yes.
as like a technical thing, it's there, and that's kind of where the road ends.
So and you and I talk a lot about this gen, and you've been kind of disappointed by it, and it's like what actually is next gen, what looks and feels like next gen. This game absolutely looks like next gen, and it's great, and it was really cool for me to see that, and I was like, we're in, boys. This is it. And then you start playing it and you're just waiting around, and you're just the joke on the internet is that you're hitting the up, like the movement button. The entire game is just you pushing up on the controller to move your character forward.
Yeah.
Because you're not actually interacting with anything. You're just seeing things happen to you.
Yep.
And there is combat, but the combat is only one-on-one combat. And it's just basically a three button mashing combo system that you do to kind of dispense with enemies. And it does almost nothing for you. You brought up a point that I really liked in our Discord that I absolutely subscribe to, where it's like, if they would have added some kind of gear that you can get, you
Yeah.
can improve your armor, some kind of something like that.
Literally anything. Give me anything. Give me a collectible that isn't like the lore with the runes. Because for me, like the I don't think it's the worst story that I've ever been told in a video game. But that being said, like what was there was nowhere near strong enough to get me to continue to play this
On its own,
franchise.
right? Yeah, yeah. If
Um,
that's all that they're giving you, then it better be, like a Schindler's List compelling story or
yeah,
something like that.
absolutely.
And it's not that, sure.
Or dare I say this? If I'm going to play an interactive movie, friend, I've got Double Switch starring Corey Haim right here. So I've got that base. I've got that covered. Thank you very
Method
much.
acting is a very sick person.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same thing. We don't hear Corey's voices in his head, so they spared us of that annoyance.
It's just all out there.
Yeah,
So, but good. That's a perfect segue though into my next point, which is that a lot. We're going to do a separate episode about this, about expectations and sequels and things like that. But a lot of what went into my belief that this was going to be the game of the year were certain expectations that were based into my experience with the first game and my knowledge of the development of the second game, and then that just turned out to not actually happen. But one of the most one of the most frustrating parts of this though is actually going through the game
yep.
and just sitting there with my doe eyes open, and all of our viewers should go watch our episode on hype, because I was at the top of the hype train waiting. This game came out at 1 o'clock in the morning and I sat around waiting for it.
Oh, Robbie, no.
And then started playing it. It's like, okay, intro movie, very cool. Graphics look great. Start going through. You're expecting it to have kind of a slow build. And then it's just like, all right, guys, give me the gameplay. Give me the gameplay.
And it just doesn't happen.
No. And so now compare that to like the David Cage games, right? So we're talking about Detroit, we're talking about Beyond Two Souls. Those games they don't hide what they are.
Yeah.
You play starting with Heavy Rain, which I have some feelings about, and going forward, there's a particular gimmick to them, and you know that they're heavy on narrative, they're light on gameplay. The gameplay improves over time, dramatically so, and by the time they get to Detroit, it's actually pretty good.
Did you ever did you play Indigo Prophecy? Their actual first game?
No, I started with Heavy Rain.
Okay. Indigo, you'll mute point because you won't do this, but Indigo Prophecy actually has pretty decent gameplay. Like you see where all of the seeds were planted in terms of what they were going to do going forward. But it was a PS2 original Xbox game. Also came out on PC. It has more of like an adventure game hook to it, like more of like a third person walk around, look for things, like detective kind of stuff. And then that's married with the gameplay. By no means, I mean it's a 7. It's a easy 7, and it's kind of famous. The European version, which was called Fahrenheit, was famous for having a sex scene that was edited out of the American release, which is Indigo Prophecy. So that's kind of what made people pay attention to it, because it came out around the time of the hot coffee thing for Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, where that got Take-Two sued, and here's Fahrenheit just doing that in a game and be like, yeah, we did it. What are you gonna do about it? So anyway, like it's funny to me when you go, and we've on our episode where we talked about Age Like Wine, Age Like Milk. You picked Heavy Rain because boy is that a milker, and I agree with you wholeheartedly based on your brutal evisceration of that game. But they started in an area where they had more gameplay, and then kind of worked. It was as if like David Cage, like is like he's the opposite of Miyamoto, where like to him story is everything, and he wanted to get away from gameplay, where that's the total inverse of Miyamoto. And you can criticize both, because like a lot of people like Miyamoto's games, there's no story at all. It's all gameplay. And you can see David Cage's games over time doing the opposite. And I think Hellblade is like, I know they don't have anything to do with each other, but to me, Hellblade is like the epitome of a thing that looks like a video game, but it's just kind of a bad, boring movie that you walk forward in.
And I could tolerate that if it was like a David Cage game. I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. This is just, it's sort of in line with everything else in terms of the lack of gameplay and the emphasis on story. But Hellblade aspires to be more than that. The game was rightfully criticized the first game for not having of that. And then if you look at the interviews that the developer has given, they gave indications that they were going to fix those things. And then they just, not only did they not fix them, they just doubled down on everything the first game did well. And then they scaled back, if anything, the things that the first game did poorly, notably the gameplay.
Yeah.
So to say I'm disappointed, I mean, I haven't finished Hellblade 2, and so that's sort of, and it's a very short game. So that's sort of, the ultimate indictment of it is that I can't get myself to just get through the end of it.
Yeah, it's like a 5-hour game. Yeah.
Sure, because it's so boring to play. I'm close to the end, but I'm not quite there yet. And the gameplay, I want to birdwalk for just a second to make a point to you because this just came up and it's kind of contemporaneous in my life. I have a very good friend of mine who you don't know, who's not you, who only cares about story in video games. And his favorite video games ever are like Mass Effect or Disco Elysium or just really heavily narrative stories, The Last of Us. And he and I got into an argument because he was shitting all over Nintendo and saying all they do is gameplay. They don't care about story at all. These are, I think the word he used is toys. Like, it doesn't matter. Go do something better with your life. You're just playing with the toys. There's no point to it. Basically, you need to have like a philosophical experience or an emotionally resonant thing happen to you while playing a video game for it to be worth it. So I brought him some Mario games. We went over to his house. And we started with, I forgot, I brought Mario.
Did you bring him movies or books as well? Because, I mean, those exist and have existed for, thousands of years and then hundreds of years.
Right. Well, he's got plenty of those. That's his problem with video games is he wants to replicate the experience of a good movie or a book in a video game without, yeah. So anyway, so within 5 minutes of us playing one of the Mario games, Mario 3D World, I think it was, he's just like giggling like a kid, and he's like, yeah, this is amazing. The one with the overworld where you can turn into a cat, that's the one that we were playing.
Yeah, that's 3D World.
Okay, and we played it for like an hour, and he was, by the time I left his apartment, I shut the door and I could hear him inside whistling the tune of the Mario game, the incredibly catchy overworld music. He's just singing to himself. So it's just, it's like, gameplay matters, man. It matters.
How old? Let me ask you, how old is this person?
35, I think. 30, 34, 35. Something.
Okay. That's a little interesting to me. These, younger than we are, but that's no spring chicken. Been around. Video games have been around. So I think that's interesting that he would be so adamant about wanting stories in when such better mediums for storytelling exist.
Yeah. So I was going to put Hellblade in front of him and be like, hey, man, you only care about story. Here you go. Amazing graphics and great story. This is your cheese here. But anyway, I'm working on him slowly but surely through the wonder of Nintendo and Mario. But anyway, to get back to Hellblade, though, yeah, incredible disappointment. It does count as a game I'm playing right now. I will get through it because that's what I do. But compared to like Cuphead, right? Yeah. A game with an entirely different graphical style, but that relies almost entirely on gameplay. There's just no comparison between the two of them. I have Hellblade like somewhere in the low to mid 70s, and that's really being charitable about it, just because of the how impressive the graphics are. It's 90% of my review is basically that. The gameplay I would literally give like an F2. I mean, it's just non-existent. And even for a guy like me, like I've played all the Life is Strange games, which also have almost no gameplay to them at all.
Yeah.
So if you're boring me, and I have a fairly high tolerance for lack of gameplay in video games, you're screwing something up, and they screwed that up. So my game of the year this year and for all years going forward will not be a Ninja Theory game, I don't think.
Did you play Enslaved? I know we talked about it on the show.
No.
That's the game that they put their name on, really. It was a PS3 360 game. It's really, really, really good. Like, it is a rare example of a game where, like, you have an AI character that you basically have to... It's like a babysitting game kind of a thing. But it's done so well. And it just stinks that, like... They are capable, like they're very capable of doing it, and Hellblade it's very clearly a choice, and just imagine if they could take their tech, which is, we both agree, is mind blowing, and just inject more video game into it. If
Yeah,
you
how
want,
about that, guys? How about
it's
that?
and it
You had 5 years.
yeah yeah. And obviously, it's easier said than done. They spent 5 years making the sequel, and I'm not trying to shit on anyone's work or anything like that, but there were some choices made, and I vehemently disagree with all the choices they made. But I also do that with Hellblade 1 as well. So,
Oh, and let's not let this moment pass without me shitting on Phil Spencer again, because Microsoft is the publisher of this game. This game was a day one release on Xbox, and it was the last opportunity, I think, this year for Microsoft to have a first party exclusive come out, or semi exclusive, since
yeah.
it's also on PC, that has a chance to be a game of the year candidate. And this ain't it, Chief. So once again, if a year ago we were talking about Xbox, you would have said, Brian, man, it's so awesome. These games are in the pipeline. There's this Redfall thing that might be cool, but Starfield going to be a huge deal. And let me tell you about Hellblade 2. That's going to be great. And then all three of those have been mid games at best.
I think Starfield had a shot. I'm not the biggest Bethesda games guy in the world, but like I respect the hell out of them, and I'm always going to check them out. So I think that game had a shot. Redfall had no shot of nothing ever. Like when I saw that trailer, like my brain just immediately turned off. Not for me. And I got to be honest with you, like from what I knew about Hellblade, and having not played it, when you would say like, "Oh, Hellblade 2 is going to be it," like I think on our Helldivers 2 episode, which came out like a week or two ago, like you even made the comment like it's going to be Game of the Year, and I was like, no, it's not.
I was like, we did that episode like 3 days before it came out.
Yeah.
So.
And so like, and I'm not saying that to shit on what your expectations or anything like that. It just for me, like where it's more of a commentary about where video games are today and what's being produced today for me is not cutting any mustard. And that's why you need 20-year-old Mario RPGs to be remade to or 500 Japanese Sega Saturn games to be made. For me personally, to have like a better interest going forward in gaming.
So I want to do a second mini bird walk based on that comment and on something you sent me recently, which just blew my mind. So we talked on a prior episode about your disappointment with the generation, specifically lack of innovation. What I had said on that episode was, well, Brian, it's hard for me to even conceive of the innovations that I'm missing out on. So it doesn't feel to me like I'm missing out on anything because I'm not creative enough to know what possibilities exist in the gaming space. Then about 48 hours ago, it was either you or the Prince, somebody put in Discord a video of a bunch of heroes playing a tank game where they have fashioned like an actual loading mechanism tank shelling
incredible
device. And everyone should go just Google this somewhere. We saw it on Reddit. I'm sure it's elsewhere, but it looks like a bunch of kids in a college dorm and they're playing, I believe, World of Tanks.
Yes.
They have actually made a loading shot. I don't know what the tank cannon is, but they've a device where you load in, I think there were like 2-liter bottles of Coke or something like that.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was.
Okay, and so they're loading those in, and they had a wheel device to actually turn the turret of the tank and then push the button. And I saw that and I was like, man, this is what Brian's talking about.
Yeah.
This is actual innovation in game. Like somebody give these guys $10 million and have them mass produce.
Please and thank you.
But we got to go down the trail though, because one of the other things that you had said, almost like foreseeing the problems with this, is that for that device to actually be created and sold at retail, like you remember, of course, Steel Battalion.
Thank you. I was going to bring it up. Yes.
Okay, so well, let me ask you a question because you were more involved in this at the time. How well did Steel Battalion do as a commercial product? Because I believe it retailed for $200 in the early aughts, right? Which was a lot.
Yes. So that game was produced. They knew exactly what they were making. They being Capcom. They produced.
Oh, Capcom made
that's
that?
a Capcom game. And they only in America produced 5,000 of them, and the boxes were numbered. So like you had like I had number like 300 or 3017 out of 5,000. They knew exactly what that thing was going to be. It sold a little bit better in Japan. Obviously it did because they have such a more of a mecha culture and more of like a simulation culture, simulations of things that don't even exist kind of a thing like Gundam and all that other stuff. So they produce more and it's called Techie in Japan. But yes, they knew exactly what they were doing with that one in terms of limiting the scope. But selling $5,200 things, I'm sure they did okay on it. Like, I mean, define okay. It's not GTA numbers, of course, but they made enough money on it to make a sequel, which was I believe it's called Line of Attack, which was an Xbox Live online version of that game. Which when it first came out, it was basically everyone who owned Steel Battalion was playing that game. So you could always jump into a game because it was such a commitment to own that thing. So for like a period of about 6 months, you could get online and play Steel Battalion with other Steel Battalion players, and it was crazy fun.
I bet.
But yeah, it's just, I'm a huge Neo Geo fan, right? And for me, the Neo Geo was always like growing up super poor. It was always this thing that I like pined over, and then once I became an adult and started earning my own money, I was able to buy a lot of Neo Geo stuff. And by spending that amount of money on a singular game, and so Neo Geo, when they hit retail initially in the 90s, they started at $250 and they topped out at like $350. That's per game. You just by spending that money, at least this works for me psychologically, I'm gonna invest time in it. And they're arcade games, so they're designed for you to keep playing over and over and over and get good at them. Fighting game, shooters, all that other stuff. So there's a commitment and a barrier of entry to those games. They're not mass audience products by any means. They never have been. And Steel Battalion fits that. If this fucking incredible tank simulation thing got funding, I see that more as like you go to a Dave and Buster's, if those things still exist. Yeah. But I could see that. Like you produce one of these things for 50 grand, you sell it to an arcade operator, you charge $5 a play, you and your buddies drink some beers, you become tankists. And you eat pizza and have the time of your life. But they could make money off of that, I think, but not Call of Duty money.
The attention to detail was so incredible. They had it so that, I'm sure you noticed this, when you would shoot the shell and the loader would recoil, some like powder would like a mist would kind of come up from the shell.
Yep.
I'm not sure what was making that mist.
Like a fogger, like a fog machine.
But it's just an incredible attention to detail.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, man, this is the innovation that we're missing here, because so exactly what you described is sort of a great scenario. It's like, just imagine the camaraderie of just hanging with your friends and then doing some kind of World of Tanks
shouting
battle
at each other about, we need more ammo now, go. And my favorite thing about it, like all the technology was really, really impressive. But the thing that really hooked me is the fact that the loader had to physically run back to where the shells were, load the shell, and then put it in, and then, do the crank to get the turret. And just like, oh my God, I can just see how much fun that would be if a bunch of unathletic dweebs like us tried to do that. It would be so fun.
or you're misaligning the shells, or you're like yelling at each other about it. Get those goddamn shells in.
Trip and fall face forward into the shells. Like all that stuff is possible.
Yeah, right.
Well, okay. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to give you the floor if there's anything else you want to say about Hellblade or expectations. Then I want to come back. We're going to do another episode, and we're only going to talk about PlayStation's state of play. So I give the floor to you. Any closing comments on Hellblade before we sign off here, Chief?
No closing comments on Hellblade, but I will use this opportunity to do a preview of a future episode where I'm going to make you talk about Supergiant games, because I dropped Hellblade, picked up Hades 2, a game that has significantly more gameplay to it, and I've just been having a hoot of a time. We don't need to go into the whole thing, but Hades 2 is spectacular. We're going to do this on a future episode, so look forward to that. And Hellblade 2, everybody can stay away from.
Super good idea. The only pun intended, because I just said super. The only Supergiant game I've ever played is Bastion. So if you want to just pump me full of that stuff and convert me, I open my arms to you, sir.
I will leap into your arms.
Perfect. Time. And I will shoot that on a slow motion camera. Okay. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the recent Sony PlayStation State of Play, and we both have thoughts there as well. So thank you so much for watching. We're on Spotify. Like, subscribe, all those good things. And come on back. We're going to do a little PlayStation talk. So thank you so much for watching.